All right. What's up, guys? Bedtime story tonight is the story of Judah and Tamar, Genesis chapter 38. And if you're 13 and under, I recommend watching this video with your parents because it is a story that contains some things that may be difficult for you to handle, until you're older. So let's begin. Judah and Tamar. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named, hang on a second. Hirah. There we go. I'm trying something new tonight. See if it works. Hang on a second. Messed it up. This is why I should stick with a paper Bible. Maybe that's what I should do. I'm trying to use this teleprompter app, which will make it a little easier. All right. Okay, perfect. Stay with a man of Adullam named Hirah. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married her and made love to her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son, who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her." As a brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the child would not be his. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought, he may die too, just like his brothers. They're bad guys. God keeps letting them die. And he's afraid that this son is also not going to provide offspring for his daughter. So Tamar went to live in her father's household. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hirah the Adullamite went with him. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. Now I want to explain this for a second. So to us, it seems strange that a woman would be passed on from husband to husband because we live in a society where men and women, for the most part, and I'll say it for the most part because there's still many areas we've yet to catch up in, but have equal rights in America. There's definitely a pay gap, gender pay gap, which needs to be changed. But what happens in ancient societies was often women were basically dependent entirely. They couldn't even work. They were dependent on their men in their family to provide for them. So why it's critical to have a husband is if you lose that husband, you're basically a beggar, or in this case, we're going to see something else that women often turned to back then because there was just no other opportunities for them. Education wasn't given to just anybody, and especially not to women, unfortunately. So this is the mentality that Tamar is going into, from failed marriage to failed marriage because she's been paired up with these evil men that are just dropping dead because they're being disobedient to God. So, for she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. So what's she going to do? When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. So you can tell this father wasn't a very righteous man himself, and no wonder he had such loser sons. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand," she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend, the Adullamite, in order to get his pledge back from the woman. But his friend did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Anaim?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her." Besides, the men who lived there said, "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughing stock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." Wow, what a double standard, right? He was okay to use a prostitute, but now that he finds out his daughter-in-law is a prostitute, or so it seems, he's ready to burn her at the stake. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said. And she added, "See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she said, "So this is how you have broken out?" And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was named Zerah. So, interesting story about some of the descendants of Abraham and Isaac. And I think the biggest takeaway I can take away from it as a man is that I live in a world where there's inequality, and I am going to be held accountable for my actions. And you can see that happens to Judah in this story, where he thinks, well, I'll just get away with it this one time. I'll sleep with this prostitute and just pay her a goat, and it'll all be good. But later on, that comes back and bites him in the butt because he's exposed for his impurity. And then it also shows to the whole community that when he was responsible to be providing for this poor girl and providing her with a husband, he was actually kind of letting everything just happen to her and leaving her alone when he should have been providing for her. So I think we can take away that from it is let's keep our minds pure, let's keep our hearts pure, and let's treat those of us who are men, let's treat women as if they were our own sisters, our own mothers. Let's not objectify them or just ignore their needs too, because there are times where women need men to stand up and help. And I think too often we tend to be silent when we see people being oppressed around us or people in need. And we also tend to be judgmental of those who are different from us, of those who have made more obvious mistakes than the ones we've made, or less politically correct mistakes, right? Less correct mistakes, because there's all these different ways people measure sin. It's like, oh, well, you've murdered. Oh, you've committed adultery. Well, you're in that zone now. But I'm going to be a glutton, and I'm going to look at pornography over here. And as long as nobody, calls me out on that, I'm going to be fine. So we definitely need to learn from this, that this is not prescriptive. It's not telling us how we should be living. It's kind of showing us descriptively how the world is, how bad it is, and hopefully it provokes some thoughts. How can we do better? And of course, this is only possible because of Jesus, because he's the one who's working in our hearts and changing us. So I hope you guys can be encouraged tonight, and have a great week. Happy Wednesday. We're almost there. Woo! All right.